Hi, this is Jaya. In this video, we shall see about Restoration England. Restoration period spans from 1660 to 1688, and at this time what all was stopped and what all was closed, everything was restored, and that was the period of Charles II. He was brought back as the King of England in 1660, and political monarchy, parliament and law, everything came back to its former status, and even the rule of the bishop, that is the episcopacy, and the prayer book were brought back. And as far as social life was concerned, the nobles and gentries, once again, they were recognized as leaders of the provincial and national life. Anglicanism was the acknowledged religion of the upper class people, and the parish churches all were patronized by the local square. But anyway, the parson and the square, they still continued their Cold War. The persons who suffered were the non-conformists and particularly the Quakers because of the Clareton Code, and the Roman Catholics were prohibited from participating in any of the local and national government functions. And this is the time when many political parties were formed, and the upper classes were divided into Whigs and Tories politically. The Tories, like the Cavaliers, ruled the rural England, and they were supporting the king, whereas the Whigs, like the Roundheads, were supporting the parliament, and they represented the landowning class, and they were associated with commercial interest. And this is the period when science developed very fast. This was the first time when science was applied in the development of agricultural industry, navigation, medicine, and engineering. And King Charles patronized in 1662 the Royal Society of Science, and along with him stood his cousin Prince Rupert, and Prince Rupert himself was a scientist, so it was a great advantage for the Royal Society of Science. And of course, at that time, science and religion were going hand in hand, and the great scientists of that time, like Robert Boyle, who is a chemist, and Isaac Newton, who is a physicist, they themselves were religious people. And the first history of Royal Society was written by Reverend Spratt, who afterwards became Bishop of Rochester. And with the spread of this scientific interest, people started losing most of their superstitious beliefs, and they realized that plagues, fires, and floods were not God sent punishment to the sinners, and even the belief in witches and witchcrafts all became less. And this new scientific spirit uh, at least went to a certain extent to change the people in all these ways. And theatres started functioning because during the Puritan rule all the theatres were shut down, and now these theatres were roofed and they were artificially lighted with candles, and they were drop curtains and painted sceneries. And earlier women parts were played by the men, but now women itself started acting in the plays, and many men came to see the actresses. uh, so theatres were full, but at the same time we cannot say that these women were well talented, particularly Nell Gwyn. She was very famous for her charm more than her professional skill, and the drama was mainly localized in London, and it appealed only to the court and the fashionable people and not to the ordinary citizens. And therefore most of the plays which were written during this restoration period only catered to the interest of these people, and therefore there was a lot of vulgarity. In fact, till the late 19th century, the well brought up young people were not allowed to visit the theatre because of the vulgarity in the plays. And the most important play is Wycherley's Country Wife, which is said to be the most vulgar plays ever produced in English. And in the Restoration period, literature had its own censorship, and the first licensing act was passed in 1663 by the Cavalier Parliament. And the main aim of this licensing act was to prevent seditious and Puritan writing. But of course, they did not stop Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained because they were great epics. And this was a period when many started having private libraries. Particularly, the private library of Samuel Pepys contained many valuable volumes, and the one in the Cotton family had many remarkable books. And in many yeomen's families, there was at least a bookshelf. And in 1684, for the first time, a public library was established in London by Tennyson. and he was a clergyman who later became the Archbishop of Canterbury. And he also built a building in the courtyard of St. Martin's Church, where the upper part was a library and the ground floor was for the workroom for the poor people. And in 1696, that is 8 years after the Glorious Revolution, Licensing Act started to stop. It did not operate after that. And with the restoration of the monarchy, the Cavalier families who had a lot of land, they became more prosperous. The people who suffered were the small squares and the wage earners and the industrial workers, because their wages were regulated by the justices of the peace, and both the trade and the industries did not have trade unions at that time. And the English people maintained a very high standard of living. The staple diet during that time was bread, beer, and meat, and vegetables and fruits also formed a small part of the regular meal, but meat was the regular meal they had. Almost half the population ate meat daily, while the other half of the population had meat at least twice a week. And sports and pastimes all came back into practice. Shooting partridges was a privilege for the squares alone. The netting of the birds on the ground was a fashionable sport of the time. Fox hunting was very popular, and more than hunting the deer or the fox, they loved going with a pack of hounds, and hounds means dogs, hunting dogs, and catching hare. The gentleman will be sitting on the horseback, while the common folk kept running along with them with a huntsman with his pole in the front. And the other sports which were very popular at that time was wrestling, boxing, sword fighting, bull and bear baiting, football, cockfighting, and horse racing. Horse racing was prominent because of the royal patronage. And we cannot say that whole of England was very rich, because only the central countries were richer than compared to the other countries. Particularly, the richest place was Middlesex, while the 7 countries of the north were poor, and the poorest of all the countries was Cumberland. And this is actually very strange, because the northern countries only had the biggest coal mines and textiles mills, but they were very poor compared to the other parts. And two great national calamities of restoration period were the plague and the Great Fire. The plague of 1665 killed nearly 1/5 of the London population, and the Great Fire, which took place in 1666, was made like it burned for nearly 5 long days, and it destroyed all the churches and other buildings. But we can say that Great Fire was also a blessing in disguise, because the city was reconstructed, and London was fully reconstructed by 4 or 5 years. And these are the happenings of the restoration period. If you have anything more to add on to what I've said, please write it in the comment box. Like the video, share it with your friends, and if you have not subscribed my channel, please subscribe and support. Thank you.